G. So, in today's class, we are going to talk about the socio-cognitive approach of critical discourse analysis proposed by Dijk. Fine, some people call him Dijk, while other people call him Dijk. Both the pronunciations are correct. He is one of the, prominent figures in the field of critical discourse analysis. So let's talk about his socio-cognitive approach, his socio-cognitive model. Before that, there are several models towards the study of critical discourse analysis. Fine. The first one is the textual approach, which is, the discourse approach, only discourse analysis, because our focus is only on the textual aspects of a text. Then we have the historical approach of discourse analysis, like we go into the background, into the history of the text, and this is how we analyze it. In the social approach, fine, uh, which is a concern of which we discussed in the previous class, if you remember, Norman Fairclough. Okay, he analyzes, according to him, text should be analyzed and it should be explained in terms of the socio-cultural situation in which the text has taken place, fine, in which the text has been produced. Then we have the cognitive approach, which looks at the cognitive structures, fine, the cognitive processes, the mental processes. When discourse production is taking place or discourse consumption is taking place, what is going on in the mind of, in the cognition of individuals, in the cognition of the language users, fine, discourse producers or discourse consumers. This is what we call cognitive approach. Now this gentleman Van Dyke, he is concerned with the socio-cognitive approach, fine, with which is, a blend of both the social norms and values, fine, and the cognition, like the memory, fine, the social and personal experiences, fine, norms and values, each and everything which are inside the minds of individual, inside the cognition of the language users. So he is concerned with this approach, socio-cognitive approach, fine. So let's begin his approach, his model of CDA. Socio-cognitive approach is a model in which the link between text and society is mediated by cognition. Fine. According to Van Dijk, textual structures and social structures are mediated by social cognition. Now we have three things here. The first one is text. The second one is society. Fine. And the middle one, that is cognition. Cognition is simply our thinking process. Fine. Now, according to Van Dijk, the relationship between, in the link between the text and the society, it is mediated by human cognition. Look at this diagram simply. Here we have the textual structures of a text. Fine. Here we have the social structures, the structures of society. Fine. Here we have the social cognition, or you may say the social cognitive structures. Now, the link between these two, it is mediated by, it is created by our cognition. Fine. Our mental structures, our memory, like whatever we have got inside our memory, like we have got the episodic memory, we have got the semantic memory. These are the various terms which we are going to discuss in this session. Fine. Now these the things, the various structures inside our memory, inside our mind, inside our cognition, those things actually mediate, they create a link between texts, fine, and social structures, like the way we interpret things, the way we produce text and interpret text, fine, all these relations are mediated by, they are created by the social cognition or mental structures. Okay. Now coming to the basic terminology, we have got three things, as I told you. textual structures, which is the discourse. Fine, the discourse is produced in society. We have the social structures, means the society, and here we have the cognitive structure, means human mind or human memory. Fine, cognition. Now discourse is already clear to you. Language in use, society, that is also clear. The various practices, the various norms and values, rituals, okay, social beliefs, social ideologies, social representations, all these things combinedly constitute society. Now our focus in today's lecture must be on cognition. So what is cognition? Cognition refers to, Merunisa is here, okay. Cognition refers to the personal as well as the social cognition. Fine. The personal beliefs as well as the social beliefs. The personal representation of society in our mind and the social representation. The personal representation of the world and the social representation of the world. Okay. The mental memory structure, fine, the personal memory, the personal mental structures, or the social mental structures, all these things combinedly constitute our cognition or cognitive structures. Fine. So what do we have in our cognitive structure? The our beliefs, our ideologies, the representation of the world, knowledge of the world, based on the knowledge which we have acquired based on our personal experience. Fine, that is personal, that is subjective, or the knowledge which we share with the other individuals of society. All this knowledge is stored in our cognition, in our memory, and this is what we call cognition. Fine. Now, according to Dijk, social cognitions are largely acquired, used, and changed through text. Fine. With the help of discourse, we acquire cognition like beliefs, representations of the world. Fine. All the mental structures, all the knowledge, all the ideologies, all these things are acquired with the help of discourse, with the help of text, with the help of language, because we acquire knowledge with the help of language, of course. Fine. Now all these representations and beliefs and ideologies and all the mental structures, whatever we have got in our memory, in our mental structures, all these things are used with the help of language. Fine. And they are changed with the help of language. Like for example, I have got certain ideologies, okay. I have acquired those ideologies from other people with the help of discourse, with the help of language. Fine. Through comprehension, the comprehension of language. Then I'm using those things, those ideologies, with the help of discourse, with the help of language. And those ideologies may get changed with the help of language if someone else, if someone else produces discourse and I listen to his or her discourse, my social structures, my cognitive structures, fine, my beliefs, my ideologies, my mental representations, they may get changed. Okay. So discourse is always there, it is always there. Fine. Coming to memory, because when you talk about cognition, so obviously we have to talk about memory, that what is inside the memory, what are the different kinds of memory. So memory does not only refer to the ability to remember. Fine. Rather it refers to our opinions, it refers to our ideologies, as I told you. Fine. It refers to the representations of the world in our mind. Okay. These are representations and processes, these are the terms which we are going to discuss in detail. Fine. The concepts, our concepts, individual concepts and social concepts, all these things combinedly constitute our memory. Fine. Now, social cognition is connected to what Van Dijk terms social memory. We have got two types of memory. One is personal memory, another is the social memory. Fine, episodic memory and semantic memory. So I'm providing you just a background. These are the things we are going to discuss. Fine. Now, social cognition is related to our social memory, while personal cognition, personal concepts, they are related to our personal memory. Now, what is meant by personal memory and the social memory? These are the things we are going to discuss. Then The cognitive processes and representations are defined relative to mental structures called memory. Again, what is inside the memory? In the memory, certain cognitive processes are taking place, and those mental processes, they then lead to certain mental representations such as thoughts, such as beliefs, fine, all whatever we have inside the memory. So let's discuss all these things in detail one by one. Starting with the memory, what do we have inside the memory? Inside the memory, first of all, we have got cognitive processes. Fine. The very first thing inside the memory, inside human mind, that is cognitive processes. Fine. Like whenever we are thinking, okay, whenever we are doing something, okay, some cognitive action, some we are performing some cognitive process. Fine. So what are the possible cognitive processes which are going on, which are taking place in our minds? They are thinking. We might be thinking at a time. Fine. We might be perceiving something. Okay, when we see something in the, or when we come across something and we perceive that thing. So every individual perceives things based on his or her own personal experience. Fine. As well as the social memory should also be taken into consideration. Now when we are doing some cognitive process, so we might be knowing something. Okay, we might be believing something, we might be understanding something, we might be interpreting something, we might be making language use, we might be busy in interaction, because they are also cognitive processes. Fine. We might be planning for some future activity, we might be hoping, or we might be feeling something. These are some of the cognitive processes. There are many more. Okay, now these cognitive processes, they take place in our mind or memory of the individual social actors. Now social actors, this is the term we'll be referring to again and again. Fine. So the very first thing related to cognition, related to memory in mind, that is uh, cognitive processes in our mind. Certain cognitive processes are taking place. Okay, and these things are taking place 24/7. When when cognitive processes are taking place, what do they result in? They result in the formation of mental representations, or in the formation of cognitive structures. Like when we are doing certain cognitive processes, certain cognitive action, such kind of cognitive actions which I already discussed. Fine. So when we are doing cognitive actions, or making cognitive processes, we are forming cognitive structures, or we are forming mental representations. We are changing our mental representations, we are storing mental representations, we are activating social representations, or we are deactivating our social representations or cognitive structure. Now what is meant by cognitive structure or mental representations? Our thoughts, our knowledge, our beliefs, our interpretations, our plans, our attitudes and ideologies, all these are our mental representations or our cognitive structures. Fine. Now when we are doing cognitive processes, cognitive actions, as I told you, we are forming these mental representations, like we are forming our thoughts. Fine. We are forming our knowledge, we are forming our beliefs, we are forming our interpretations, plans. For example, if I'm sitting alone and I'm making some mental process, fine, or I'm having discussion with someone, because interaction and language use, as I told you, they are also cognitive processes. So when we are doing cognitive process, we might be planning about the future activities such as exam, for example. Fine. So we are forming our attitudes and ideologies. When we are doing cognitive process, we might be changing our knowledge, our thoughts, our beliefs, our plans, our attitudes, our ideologies. When we are doing cognitive process, we might be storing any of these mental representations, cognitive structures. Fine. We might be activating any of these things. For example, if I talk about uh, Benazir Bhutto, for example, fine, not to mention the names of politicians, but anyhow, just an example. If we talk about the World War II, World War One, so I am activating, fine, the I'm activating my plans, my future plans, which I have, in the subconscious part of my mind. Okay, I might be activating some thoughts, some knowledge, some beliefs, find some interpretations from the past, from the from the unconscious part of my mind, even. So we might be activating some mental representations, or we might be deactivating. For example, you're listening to me right now. Okay, now you have already got certain knowledge related to memory in mind and cognition. Now there might be some faulty knowledge as well, there might be some faulty ideologies, okay, some faulty attitudes, some faulty plans. Now if you are making now at this moment, if you are doing certain cognitive actions, certain mental actions, what are you doing? You're actually deactivating those faulty beliefs, those faulty pieces of knowledge and faulty thoughts, etc. So, how many things do we have? Terms, cognitive processes are taking place in the mind. Fine. Then, with the help of those cognitive processes, we are forming, we are changing, we store, or we activate or deactivate our cognitive processes, our cognitive structures, or mental representations. And these are the mental representations stored inside our mind. Fine. Cognitive processes and representations, they cause and control all human actions, fine, and interaction, and hence also all language use and discourse. Now, if we look at the cognitive processes and cognitive representations, our thoughts, our knowledge, our beliefs, our plans, our attitudes, our ideologies, they cause our social actions and interaction, fine, and they control our social actions and social interactions, our all language use and discourse, fine. The discourse of one individual must be different from the discourse of another individual. Why? Based on the knowledge, because the knowledge of that person is different, the beliefs of that person are different, the attitudes, the plan, the ideologies, the thoughts, since the mental processes and the representations of people are different. Like these things, the cognitive processes and the mental representations, they vary from person to person. That is why the actions and interactions and discourses of individuals are different. Okay, same is the case with groups as well. Like the cognitive processes and the representations, the social representations, find the social attitudes, the social ideologies, the social knowledge, socially shared knowledge in thoughts and beliefs of a group of people, they must be different from those of the other group. That is why their action, their interaction, and their language use and discourse, they are different. Fine. Now, to conclude so far, we have got memory. Inside the memory, certain cognitive processes are taking place, fine. Those cognitive processes form or change or activate and deactivate mental representations, fine. And those mental representations lead to human action. Those mental representations, they direct human actions, fine. They control and cause human actions, fine. And not only actions, rather human interaction, language use, and discourse as well. Is this clear so far?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Okay, good.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, there are two basic types of memory:
Yes, sir.
short-term memory and long-term memory. You must be familiar with these terms, but let's discuss them very briefly. Then you'll come to the entire structure of human memory, human cognition. Fine. If you look at the short-term memory, also known as the short form, abbreviated form is STM, no, stands for short-term memory. We have the long-term memory, long-term memory. Fine. So in the short term memory, it is also called the working memory because it is working whenever we are thinking. So we are thinking with the help of the working memory, short term memory. Fine. Now this is the in this memory, the online processes of attention, understanding, and production of action take place. Like at the moment I'm speaking or I'm thinking, fine. So I'm actually doing the process of thinking with the help of my short-term memory. Fine, I'm coming to the explanation now. uh, what happens in the long-term memory? It stores the results of these processes. Fine. For instance, in the form of knowledge or beliefs. Now I'm talking, I'm thinking, for example, now I'm thinking about my future plans. Okay. Or I'm thinking about or I'm perceiving and interpreting the speech of a politician. Fine. So what am I doing at the moment? I'm using, at this particular moment, I'm using my short-term memory, I'm using my working memory. That is the online process. Find the online process of attention, understanding, and production of social actions. So I'm, for example, we are listening to a speech, so we are using our short-term memory. Fine. And then the results of the social actions, okay, the actions which we perform with the help of our short-term memory, those results are stored then in our long-term memory. Fine. In the form of knowledge or in the form of our beliefs. Let me compare human memory to a computer memory or a smartphone. In a smartphone we have got the the ROM and the RAM. That is RAM is sometimes like we say Samsung phone has got 4 GB RAM or 3 GB RAM or 6 GB RAM, nowadays 8 GB RAM as well. Fine. And we have got the ROM, that is 28 GB, that sorry, 32 GB, 64 GB, 128 GB. Fine. 264 GB, 256. Fine. 512 GB, even 1 TB might be there. Fine. Now look at the RAM. The short-term processes are taking place in the RAM. That is a short-term memory. On the other hand, if we look at the long-term memory, so for example, if you're copying certain files or if you're recording a lecture with the help of your smartphone, so the short-term memory is in process. Fine. Then the result of the short-term memory is the long-term record of that lecture. So same is the case with human mind as well. We have got the short-term memory. When we are doing any kind of mental action, we are making the use of our short-term memory. Fine. You're listening to me right now, so you are using your short-term memory. You are perceiving the individual speech sounds, then you are combining them, into words. Fine. Proper phonological patterns. Then you are interpreting them in the form of meanings. Okay. So this is the short-term memory. You are doing short-term, you are using your short-term memory. Then you are storing the results of this short-term processes. You are storing these things in the form of knowledge, and this knowledge and these beliefs will exist in your mind for a long time. So that is why because they are stored in your long-term memory. Clear? So that is the basic difference between short-term memory and long-term memory. But keep in mind, both these kind of memories, both of them are used during the production and comprehension of language. How are they used? We are going to discuss in detail, but let me tell you, you are now you are listening to me. Fine. You are listening to me, so are using both because uh, look at comprehension of language. For example, you are using both because you cannot understand me if your long-term memory is asleep. Fine. If your long-term memory is not functional, you cannot interpret me because in the long-term memory these things are already present. Fine. The various grammatical and lexical phonological structures of the language, they are already present in your long-term memory. Similarly, my name Suleiman, who am I, who are you, what is our relation? Fine. What is meant by discourse analysis, what is the subject, your students, all this background knowledge is stored in your long-term memory. So you are making the use of your long-term memory, and at the same time you are perceiving the speech sounds at this particular moment, fine, you are trying, you are making attempt to convert those speech sounds into meaning, something meaningful, fine, into meaningful chunks. That is why you are making the use of our short-term memory as well. And same is the case with production. I'm making you language production right now, fine, I'm producing language, so I'm also thinking at this particular moment what to say and what not to say, fine, where am I, what am I doing right now. So I'm making the use of my short-term memory, and I already have these ideas in our mind which I'm sharing with you, so I'm at the same time making the use of my long-term memory as well. By making the use of short-term memory, this is what we usually discuss in psycholinguistics, fine, because there are certain memories, like we have got the phonetic memory, then first of all we have got the auditory memory, then the phonetic memory, then the phonological memory, fine, then we have got the semantic memory, then the discourse memory, and finally we have got the pragmatic memory. So these are all the things which we do, fine, making use of the short term memory and long term memory during the production and comprehension of discourse, production and comprehension of language. Memory are of two types, as I told you, short-term memory and long-term memory. Now the long-term memory is further divided into, long-term memory means like our belief system, fine, our beliefs, our knowledge, fine, our thoughts. Oh my god, we are left 10 minutes only. Okay, so the long-term memory is further divided into two types. The first one is episodic memory and the second one is semantic memory, fine. So episodic memory is it recalls the personal facts or personal information, or it stores, okay. uh, on the other hand, semantic memory recalls or it stores the general and socially shared facts and information. For example, if you talk about any, like anything in the world, fine, for example, you feminism, if you talk about feminism or gender inequalities, okay, uh, discourse analysis, for example, if you look at computer or laptop, so you might be having certain personal facts, personal information which may get activated, fine, during the production and comprehension of speech. So those personal facts and personal information are stored in your episodic memory. What sort of personal information? For example, if I say uh, smartphone, so the picture of your smartphone, the smartphone, or let's suppose if I say the smartphones which have been used so far, so the personal information, personal facts, the smartphones which you have used personally in your life, fine, like I might have used the Kia mobile, then Samsung Galaxy S6, and now Samsung C Pro, fine, may God give me iPhone 10, okay, I'm hoping for that. Anyhow, so these are my personal information, personal facts. Now you might be thinking of the smartphones which you have personally experienced, okay, which you are having personal first hand experience of. Now general information in general facts, like all the smartphones which have been used so far. If I say which phone is in use nowadays, so I'm using my personal phone, you are using your personal phone, this is stored in your episodic memory, in your personal memory, fine. On the other hand, semantic memory, which is also called the shared memory, the socially shared memory or the social memory, it which phone is nowadays in use, so obviously we have the name of iPhone 10, fine. This is the shared memory. And this is a very specific example. If we go for some general examples, like our uh, uh, beliefs, fine, our ideologies, then these things are further clarified, like our personal opinion regarding particular movement, for example feminism, for example racism, fine. So we might be having our personal approach, our personal information related to that thing, personal experience, and we have the shared information as well, the socially shared information. So these are the two different kinds of memory: episodic memory and semantic memory. Then we have got two types of cognition, Fine. As I told you about the personal memory, episodic memory, and semantic memory. Fine. So, yes, so hell, fine. If we have two types of cognition based on these two types of memory. Okay, the episodic memory and semantic memory, personal cognition and social cognition. And you already know what is meant by cognition in cognitive process. Fine. So the personal cognition, also known as the mental models or personal mental models. On the other hand, the social cognitions are the social knowledge, the socially shared attitudes and ideologies. Fine. So let's talk about both these type of cognitions in detail. The mental models or personal cognition. The mental models are subjective representations of events or situations stored in the episodic or autobiographical memory. Episodic memory, personal memory. Fine. The personal part of long-term memory. This is, as I told you, long-term memory is divided into two parts: the personal part and the social part. Fine, the shared part. So these things, okay, mental models, they are the subjective and personal representation of events or situations which are stored in the episodic memory, or also known as autobiographical, like related to one's personal experiences. Fine. The personal memory of long-term, the personal part of long-term memory, where we store our ongoing and past personal experiences. Fine. Like if you go to for example somewhere the Aurat March, or if you go to Namal, for example Namal Islamabad. Okay, now you must have got your personal ongoing and past experiences which based which are based on you know your personal beliefs and personal thoughts, personal mental cognitive processes. So these are the mental models which are the personal cognition. They are the mental models which are subjective representations of events, subjective thoughts, your own personal thoughts, your own personal knowledge related to something. Fine. Related to an event or a situation. These, on the other hand, if you look at the social cognition, then they are socially shared, but we are going to discuss it later on. So if we look at the production of discourse and understanding of discourse, and we relate it to our personal cognition. Fine. Production of discourse, or producing a meaningful discourse about an event such as a story, a news article, involves the partial expression of a mental model of that event. If you are producing a discourse about a story, about a news article, fine, about any event, when you are producing discourse, so partially you are expressing your own personal mental model, mental event. Fine. Your personal thoughts related to that event. For example, if I told you the like we all had a trip to the Natya Gali, if you remember. If I ask you to discuss that event, okay, so partially you will express it in terms of the social cognition, like the shared knowledge, and partially you will express it in terms of your own personal model, your personal knowledge of that event, okay, your personal experience of that event. Fine. So this is the production of discourse. In the same way, understanding of discourse, understanding such a discourse consists in the construction or updating of a mental model of the event. Fine. Understanding a discourse. Let's suppose if you are I'm talking about Nathia Gali, the trip which we had to Nathia Gali, or if I'm talking about Namal, your first semester. Fine. So you are constructing a mental model regarding that event. For example, if you do not have an idea in your mind related to that thing, okay, so for example, if I say when we went to Nathia Gali, I saw a big dog over there. Now when I told you this thing, you constructed a mental model of that event. Fine, there must be the, you know, the images and the structures of those roads in a big dog. Now this, the picture of this dog varies from individual to individual. Faisal might be having a black dog in his mind. Suhail might be having a white dog in his mind. Fine. uh, Maronisa might be having a gray dog in her mind. Fine, these are the personal models. Now you are either constructing mental models, fine, of that event, or you are updating your mental models of that event. For example, if you are aware of something but partially aware, not completely, fine, and I may add to your knowledge related to our Neptunatya Gali, so you are actually updating your personal mental model of that event. Is this clear so far?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay, we have got very few seconds, so let me discuss the last point, and then I'm going to start another session for the social cognition. Mental models are individual, personal, subjective, and multimodal. Now, these things are already clear: individual, personal, and subjective. How are they multimodal? Okay, they are subjective because they involve our personal emotions and opinions. Fine, and at the same time, they are multimodal because they do not contain one model only, one mode only, rather they contain visions, the images, the sounds, the gestures, the actions. Fine, so that is why they are